There's a reason so many dedicated female runners over the age of 45 struggle to get faster, and it's not what you think. After working with thousands of women, I kept seeing the same pattern. So I'm going to show you the surprising factor that's slowing you down and how to finally turn your training into real progress. It's not that they're lazy, it's not that they're inconsistent, and it's usually not that they're following a terrible plan. It's that they're doing the training, but not allowing the training to actually turn into progress. And one runner said something to me recently that sums this up beautifully. She said, "I'm still putting in the work, but everything feels harder than it should. I'm training, but I don't feel like I'm getting fitter. I just feel tired." And if you're a female runner over 45, there's a very good chance that this lands somewhere close to home, because this is one of the biggest blind spots we see. People will obsess over mileage, sessions, shoes, race pacing, and even cadence. But if you ask them how well they're actually recovering, the answer usually gets vague very quickly. And that's a problem, because recovery is not the opposite of training. Recovery is where training actually becomes useful. So in this video, we're going to unpack what recovery really means, what it looks like when you're not getting enough of it, why this becomes even more important for female runners over 45, and how to fix it without feeling like you're losing momentum or fitness. Because once you understand this properly, a lot of the confusion disappears. Your pace starts making more sense, your fatigue starts making more sense, and very often your progress starts moving again. So, Linz, let's start with the most important question. What is actually happening inside the body when a female runner is training consistently but not recovering enough?
That's a really good place to start, because most people think of recovery as something soft and optional, almost like it's just a nice extra if you've got time. But physiologically, it's absolutely central. A useful way to think about it is like renovating a house. Training is the demolition phase. You strip wallpaper, you knock out walls, you pull up floors, and it looks messy. Recovery is the building phase, where those walls go back stronger, straighter, and more useful than they were before. But if you keep smashing down new walls before the last bit of the house has actually been fixed, you don't get progress, you just get a messy building site. And that is exactly what happens if the body, when recovering, doesn't match training load. When you train, especially if you're doing quality work or increasing volume, you create controlled muscle damage, mechanical stress, energy depletion, and a temporary inflammatory response. All of that is normal. In fact, that's part of the signal that tells the body to adapt. But if you train again before those systems have had a chance to reset properly, the inflammation stops being helpful and starts becoming chronic. Glycogen stores don't reload properly. Stress hormones stay elevated for too long. The nervous system remains under strain. And the tissues that were meant to rebuild are still trying to catch up. So then the next run feels harder, not necessarily because you're less fit, but because the system is still carrying yesterday.
And that's the part so many female runners miss, because the story they tell themselves is usually something like, maybe this is just my age, maybe this is hormonal, or maybe this is just what running feels like now. And of course, age and hormonal changes do influence recovery. We can't pretend otherwise. But what I see far more often is not some mysterious, irreversible decline. It's accumulated fatigue being misread as a loss of ability. And those are two very different things. Because if it's accumulated fatigue, that means there's something we can actually work with. It means the body isn't broken. It means that the system is just overloaded. And that distinction matters, because one of those stories leads to smart adjustments and the other leads to resignation. So if somebody is watching this and thinking, okay, that sounds familiar, what are the signs? What should she actually be looking for before she ends up completely flat?
Usually the signs appear earlier than people realize, but because they come in quietly, they get normalized. The first one is often that easy runs stop feeling easy. The pace that should feel conversational starts to feel like work. Even if you can still technically do it, there's just more drag in the system. The second is that resting heart rate starts to creep up, or heart rate during easier efforts is higher than normal at the same pace. The third is sleep disturbance. And this is a big one for female runners over 45 because sleep is already more vulnerable in this phase of life. If you're waking up tired, waking up in the night, or feeling wired instead of restored, that matters. Then you often see mood changes, motivation dips. You start feeling less excited about runs you would normally enjoy. You become more irritable and just mentally flat. Then the really frustrating one is that performance stalls. Not in a dramatic way, just enough that you start thinking, why am I not getting any return on the work that I'm doing? That is often the point where recovery has gone missing.
And what I find really interesting is that female runners are often incredibly compassionate about everyone else's fatigue, but not their own. They'll say to a friend, oh, you probably need a lighter week. But then when it's about themselves, say, no, I just need to be tougher. And that mindset can be brutal because running attracts people who like structure, discipline, and effort. So psychologically, recovery feels uncomfortable. It feels like you're being passive and like you're losing momentum. But that's only true if you misunderstand what recovery is doing. Because recovery is not you stepping away from progress. Recovery is the thing that allows progress to exist at all.
Exactly. Your aerobic system does not improve during the session itself. The session creates the need for adaptation. It's the recovery window that allows the cardiovascular system, the muscular system, the endocrine system, and the nervous system to actually respond. So if we keep adding more work while that adaptation is still incomplete, we're essentially layering stress faster than the body can absorb it. It's like trying to bake a second cake in a tin where the first one is still half cooked. You can keep pouring batter in, but you're not getting two cakes. You're just getting a big mess. That's what a lot of female runners over 45 are doing with their training. They're not undercommitted, they're overlayered.
So let's get really practical now, because somebody watching this might be thinking, well, right, I see myself in this. I'm more tired more often than I should be. My easy runs feel harder than they used to. I'm probably under-recovered. So what's the first thing she should do? Not in theory, but in reality.
The first thing I would do is look at intensity before volume. A lot of people assume they need to cut days or cut mileage immediately. And sometimes that is the right call, but more often the first mistake is that too much of the week is being run a little too hard. So I'd start by creating genuine contrast in the week. That means keeping the same number of running days if needed, but pulling the majority of those runs back to truly easy conversational effort. Not kind of easy, not it feels manageable, properly easy. Because that one change alone often reduces the total stress load enough for the body to start catching up. The second thing is to schedule recovery before you feel desperate for it. If you only rest when you've already hit the wall, then you're reacting too late. Recovery should be part of the structure, not an emergency response. And that means lighter days, lighter weeks, and honest awareness of what else is going on in life as well. Because for female runners over 45, the training load is never just the run. It's the run plus the work stress, plus the family load, plus sleep quality, plus hormonal fluctuations, plus everything else you're carrying. The body doesn't separate those neatly. It just adds them up.
Yeah, that's such an important point, Liz, because I think one of the biggest mistakes female runners over 45 make is treating running stress as if it exists in a vacuum, and it doesn't. Your body does not say, this fatigue is from a threshold session, so I'll count it differently from perimenopause, poor sleep, work stress, and not eating enough before a run. It all goes into the same system. So recovery has to be looked at as a whole body issue, not just, did I have a day off? Now, before we go further, because the next part is where this becomes incredibly actionable. If you want help balancing training stress and recovery properly for this phase of life, that's exactly why we created our online masterclass specifically for female runners over 45. It's a free online session where we show female runners over 45 how to structure training in a way that helps you build speed and stay consistent without constantly feeling like you're on the edge of breaking down. You can book your free spot by scanning the QR code on the screen now or by clicking the link below. Now, Linz, let's come back to something you mentioned earlier, because I think this is one of the most useful real-world indicators we have, and that's heart rate. How do you use heart rate to spot recovery issues?
Heart rate is one of the clearest ways to see what the body is telling you in real time. because it reflects what the system is dealing with underneath the surface. If resting heart rate is higher than normal for a few days in a row, that can be a sign that the body is still dealing with stress or inflammation. If heart rate is unusually high during a pace that would normally feel very comfortable, that can be a sign that your nervous system and cardiovascular system are not as ready as you think. And this is where people often make the wrong move. They see the pace slowing or the heart rate climbing, and they try to push harder to fix it. But if the system is already under strain, pushing harder is usually like trying to silence a smoke alarm by waving a tea towel at it. You might feel like you're doing something, but you're not fixing the cause. The better response is to recognize that the signal is telling you to reduce load, recover well, and then come back when the body is actually ready to benefit.
And I think that's a bit female runners miss very often. You don't lose fitness by respecting recovery. You lock fitness in by respecting recovery. That's a very different mindset, because a lot of women are terrified that if they back off for a few days or if they take a lighter week, they're going to become slower. But in reality, the thing that's already slowing them down is the fact that they haven't let the training sink in. So let's finish with something really practical. If a female runner over 45 is watching this right now and wants to start improving recovery from today, what are the big levers?
Shona, the first is sleep, without question. If you want a recovery tool that has the biggest return on investment, it is sleep. That doesn't mean perfection. It means prioritizing it far more seriously than most runners do. The second is fueling, especially after training, within about 30 minutes of finishing a run, especially a harder or a longer run. You want to be getting in carbohydrate and protein so the body can start replenishing glycogen and begin tissue repair. The third is active recovery, easy walking, mobility, light cycling, very gentle movement, not because it's magical, but because it improves circulation, reduces stiffness, and helps the body transition out of stress. The fourth is strength work. And this surprises people sometimes, but stronger tissues handle training load better. If your muscles are stronger and your body is more stable, the cost of running is lower, which means you often need less recovery time to bounce back. And the fifth is planning. Not guessing, not going by mood alone, actually knowing which days are for stress and which days are for adaptation. This is what starts to change everything.
So recovery is not passive. It's not you doing nothing. It's not you being soft. And it's definitely not time wasted. Recovery is an active part of your training. And if you start treating it like that, you can get stronger without constantly running yourself into the ground. So here's the real bottom line. If you're training hard but not improving, it may not be your age, your talent, or your plan. It may simply be that your body is not getting the chance to turn the work into progress. Fix that, and a lot starts working again. And if you want to understand what your body is trying to tell you even more clearly, then in our next video, we're going to break down exactly what your heart rate can reveal about fatigue, fitness, and overtraining. And honestly, it's one of the most eye-opening ways to look at your training once you understand it properly.